Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I know you love listening to audiobooks, and we've got over 100 novels ready for you to listen. Plus, if there's a novel you want to hear, just send us the title and we'll turn it into an audiobook for you. To access this exclusive feature and support our work, join us on Patreon, the link is in the description. Chapter 651. After dealing with the so-called celestial group, Syd turned his gaze upward. He saw a peculiar place, a vast pit filled with various gray stone sculptures, and three unusual beings. The quarry of the gods, where gods who had lost their worship would perish and turn into stone. Countless corpses of deities littered the area. As for the infinite three witches, or rather, the eternal sisters, they fed on the souls of these gods and dispersed their power back into the universe. That was one of their duties. Their other responsibility was guarding the billions of infinity stones. Syd glanced at the three hooded, wrinkled old women. They appeared unremarkable, but in truth, they were entities born even before the primeval creator gods, much like Nemesis, the goddess of vengeance. They had once repelled the Phoenix Force and the goddess of death. As Syd observed them, without even attempting to hide, the infinite three witches immediately noticed him. "You are." The three witches were shocked, stunned by the being before them. What they sensed from him felt like the very origin of all things, overwhelming them with awe and fear. To them, he felt like a creator god that had not yet created a universe. And what he would create, would be an omnipotent universe. How was that possible? They wondered if their senses were deceiving them. But just as they tried to further probe him, Syd's figure faded like a dream, vanishing without a trace. The three witches were left wondering if they had imagined the whole thing. Had there ever been anyone there at all? Elsewhere. Syd had already left and was thinking about where to go next. Suddenly, a thought struck him. Right, if I remember correctly, there's a passage between the Marvel Universe and the DC Universe, isn't there? He was sure of it. Within the omnipotent universe, there had to be such a gateway. After all, the Avengers and mutants had once fought the Justice League, Superman, Flash, and the rest. Avengers vs. Justice League. Syd was quite curious about the DC Universe. As he prepared to open his omniscience to locate the gateway to the DC Universe, or perhaps even force one open using his omnipotent power, something else caught his attention. He suddenly sensed a powerful being descending upon the 616 universe. This being had a towering humanoid form, completely nude, its body gleaming like molten gold. Upon its neck rested three golden heads. A piece of purple cloth covered its head, concealing two of the faces, leaving only the one in the front visible. The visible face represented justice. The half-concealed face stood for vengeance. The fully shrouded one symbolized necessity. With just one glance, Syd realized he had underestimated this living tribunal. Even without fully unleashing his omniscience, he could sense its nature. This living tribunal was omnipotent universe level. Countless singular universes made up the multiverse. Countless multiverses formed mega-universes. And countless mega-universes culminated in the omnipotent universe. There is only one omnipotent universe. As the judge overseeing and maintaining balance within this supreme reality, the living tribunal's power was undeniably of omnipotent universe class. Before the tribunal stood five beings, the creators of the 616 universe, including eternity. Under the power of the tribunal, they were instantly transported before it. They trembled as they faced the living tribunal, especially Galactus, who noticed the tribunal's gaze lingered on him for several seconds. Due to Syd's presence, they knew who the tribunal was here for. At that moment, the tribunal also sensed something, a mysterious being watching it. In an instant, the tribunal identified the Watcher, and the reason it had come to the 616 universe. Recently, it had sensed that a powerful new entity had emerged here. The reason it only seemed to have emerged was that the tribunal couldn't detect any information about this being without witnessing them firsthand. Clearly, the being was too powerful, powerful enough to disturb the balance of the omnipotent universe. And so, it had descended upon the 616 universe to investigate and suppress this anomaly. But something unexpected happened. Even upon seeing the being directly, the tribunal still couldn't perceive anything, only a feeling. The same sense the three witches had. That primal, all-originating sensation, as though it was another one above all. Or perhaps, a creator god that had not yet created. The tribunal couldn't believe it. It wondered if its senses were deceiving it. And then, across countless universes and dimensions, Syd gazed toward the 616 universe's tribunal. In the next moment, his calm, mysterious voice echoed across the entire 616 universe. Leave. With a boom, the living tribunal was blasted out of the 616 universe without any resistance. It tumbled through countless universes before finally landing in an unknown reality. As its body came to a stop, the tribunal was no longer composed, its heart was gripped with fear. It hadn't been able to resist at all. That being even felt capable of annihilating it in an instant. How was that possible? It was the living tribunal. The one appointed by the one above all to govern the omnipotent universe. How could such a god be born within the omnipotent universe? For the first time, the tribunal questioned everything. Its prior plan to judge the 616 universe was gone. It never wanted to return to that cursed place ever again. Back in the 616 universe, eternity, infinity, oblivion, death, and Galactus stood frozen in shock. The supreme judge of the omnipotent universe had been kicked out just like that, by a single word. Our brother, what level of power has he reached? Galactus took in a cold breath. While they remained in shock, Syd had already turned his attention away from the tribunal. He was now focused on the gateway to the DC universe. Briefly unlocking his omniscience, he immediately located the passage. Should I go? He hesitated, caught between curiosity and uncertainty. At that moment, a familiar prompt rang out. Omniscience and Omnipotence EXP +1. Ability, Omniscience and Omnipotence, 0/2000, Level 4. So, it's Level 4 now. Syd murmured to himself. End of chapter. Chapter 652. Ability, Omniscience and Omnipotence, 0/2000, Level 4. With the upgrade to Level 4, Syd felt his dominion strengthened even further, now just one step away from his final, ultimate transformation. Even without that final step, he could already sense that his omniscient and omnipotent power now encompassed countless infinite dimensions and realities. At this moment, the mere energy radiating from him, influenced by Marvel's system laws, had spontaneously formed countless miraculous singularities. From each of these infinite singularities, infinite realms, dimensions, universes, and planes were born, and perished, around him. In every fleeting instant, countless dimensions, realities, and universes were created. And in the next instant, countless others ceased to exist. Even though he had not formally created anything yet, he was already, in essence, a creator god. This phenomenon was entirely unintentional, merely the result of the aura he casually released. Syd could feel a profound metaphysical transformation taking place within himself, one that no being could comprehend or define. He hadn't even reached level 5, but still, these changes came naturally. Syd simply shook his head, unconcerned by it all. But this meant one thing: no one would be able to comprehend his form anymore. If he truly intended to visit the DC universe, he would need to assume an appearance understandable to lower-level beings, a dimensional descent of sorts. After a brief moment of thought, he chose not to use his full power to forcibly define himself in a lower form. Instead, he prepared to cast a projection of himself, a descent into the DC universe. In the next moment, the portal to the DC universe appeared before him the moment he looked toward it. Before entering, he opened his omniscience slightly, to probe for the most powerful entities within DC. Instantly, 3 beings were revealed. The Presence, DC's supreme god. The Overmonitor, the Primordial One, or the Great Void from which all things in DC were born. The Great Evil Beast, the shadow opposite of God, born from his darkness, the ultimate embodiment of all evil. Among these, Syd's attention focused on the Presence. Unlike Marvel, the DC universe did indeed have a concept of God. He was curious about this being, who was also said to be omniscient and omnipotent. But ultimately, Syd didn't take it too seriously. Though this Presence was all-knowing and all-powerful, Syd could clearly sense that he was more omniscient and omnipotent than the Presence. His authority surpassed even that of the DC god. Even if Syd's omnipotence was only level 4, a mimicry of the true god, it still far exceeded the Presence's capabilities. With his thoughts gathered, Syd turned his focus back to the portal. The next second, he cast a fragment of his will toward the DC universe. DC universe. America, nighttime. In a farmer's home, a girl sleeping in bed suddenly had a dream. In the dream, a mysterious being told her that she would give birth to a son, and that his name would be Syd. The next morning, Annie awoke, puzzled by how vivid the dream had been. What a realistic dream. She didn't take it seriously, assuming it was just unusually clear. Until 2 months later, when strange symptoms began. A routine hospital visit revealed something that left Annie utterly stunned. She was pregnant. But she was a virgin. How could she be pregnant? Listening to the doctor's concerned advice, Annie sat dazed, recalling the dream she had had 2 months ago. Could it have been real? At the same time, a strange star began appearing in the night sky. Bright and luminous, it hovered over the land like a divine omen. Astrologers and stargazers were shocked. Was this the sign of a divine descent? Yet, whenever anyone attempted to locate the child based on the star's position, the star would vanish. As if the being did not wish to be found. Under this celestial phenomenon, 8 months passed. In a hospital delivery room, Annie screamed in pain. Then, after some time, a baby boy was born. The infant glowed with radiant light. At that moment, everyone in the hospital vaguely heard a holy hymn in their minds, as if angels were singing in praise. Before Annie's astonished eyes, the baby aged rapidly, becoming a 9-year-old boy in seconds. A white holy robe formed over his body, making him look divine, like a sacred figure. Syd opened his eyes, glanced at the stunned Annie on the hospital bed, and then at the dumbfounded doctors nearby. So this is the DC universe. He curiously scanned his surroundings. As for the shocked doctors, he paid them no mind. He came to the DC universe purely for fun, to pass time until he reached level 5 omnipotence. And maybe to meet Superman, Flash, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and the like. Naturally, he didn't care what others thought of him. In fact, if it weren't for the awkwardness of appearing as an adult, he wouldn't have even maintained the 9-year-old form. After all, being 9 was still technically considered a child, right? Probably. Just then, gasps echoed through the quiet delivery room. Oh my God. My lord. The glowing, floating boy shocked everyone. They wondered if they were dreaming or hallucinating. How could a newborn child suddenly grow up? Not only that, he was glowing, floating, and radiating divine majesty. Draped in holy white robes, barefoot in the air, Syd looked toward them. Fixing his gaze on the middle-aged doctor and 2 young nurses, he spoke calmly. What do you wish for? I can grant it. The doctor, Toby, still in shock, blurted out instinctively, I want a luxurious villa and enough money to never work again. I've had enough of this exhausting life. One of the young nurses, a woman in her 20s named Isha, also blurted, my younger brother disappeared a few years ago. I want to find him. The final nurse, a woman in her 30s named Rachel, spoke sorrowfully, my mother passed away. I want her to come back to life. The 3 were stunned by their own words, surprised they had so easily voiced their deepest wishes. They didn't actually expect anything, especially Rachel, who thought her request was far too unrealistic. Annie, still lying on the delivery bed, also thought to herself, the doctor's wish might be doable, but the others. Just as she thought Rachel's wish was absurd, Syd's calm voice echoed. You ask, and it shall be given. You seek, and you shall find. For all who ask, shall receive. And all who seek, shall find. The moment those words left Syd's lips, a sudden change occurred. End of chapter. Chapter 653. 900 PS. In an instant, the middle-aged doctor, Toby, felt a stream of memories flood into his mind. In those memories, he owned a luxurious villa, and had a fortune of $100 million. A sum that, if spent normally, could last several lifetimes. If he squandered it, though, well, that wasn't Syd's concern. Toby was left utterly shocked. He'd only made an offhand remark. He hadn't even seriously hoped for it, and yet it came true. On the other side, the young nurse named Isha, in her 20s, also had a series of vivid memories surface in her mind. She saw her younger brother being abducted, subjected to illegal human experimentation, and ultimately dying, reduced to a mere urn of ashes. Before she could even despair, she saw those long-buried ashes begin to rise from the ground, coalescing into a new body, fully restored, with clothing formed from light. He had been brought back to life. The next moment, that newly revived young man vanished from his original spot and reappeared right inside the operating room, in front of Isha and the others. Everyone. They were dumbfounded. And it wasn't over. The nurse named Rachel, who had lost her mother years ago, now stared in shock as her mother, who should have been long gone, suddenly appeared in the operating room. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, "Brother! Mother!" One shout after another echoed through the operating room. Everyone was plunged into astonishment. As they pieced everything together, they realized their wishes had actually been fulfilled. That was the part that left them the most shaken. Toby's wish was still within reason, it could be done, given the right resources. But Isha's and Rachel's. Two people who had died had been brought back to life. Soon, all eyes, including those of the resurrected, turned to the glowing child floating in the room. But Syd paid no attention to their stunned expressions. With a calm tone, he said, "Your wishes have been granted." Then, casting a final glance toward Annie on the hospital bed, he phased effortlessly through the wall and drifted outside. As for Annie, she didn't need anything from him. She had no wish to fulfill. Because she had served as the vessel for his descent, her physique had undergone a fundamental transformation. Her very essence, her rank, had been elevated far beyond the human realm. She was now, in essence, a divine being within the DC universe, even if she hadn't realized it yet. So, Syd didn't bother granting her anything more. Seeing him vanish, Annie froze, panic flickering across her heart. Meanwhile, Toby and the others, once they snapped out of their daze, were overwhelmed with both shock and regret. They were awed by the miracle they'd just witnessed, but also frustrated by how casually they had squandered a wish. If they had asked to become gods or something, would it have worked? The thought haunted them. Why had they been so careless? Why had they not taken time to reflect before speaking? True, what they had wished for had been what they most desired in that moment, but in hindsight, those wishes now felt small and meaningless. If they had wished to become gods, perhaps any desire could have been fulfilled after that. Now that chance was gone, wasted. As the thought burned in their minds, they couldn't help but speculate on what kind of being had descended. Was it a god? Or something more? Meanwhile, Syd floated out of the hospital, fully aware of the thoughts stirring in their minds, but utterly indifferent. He looked down, calmly observing the streets below. Come to think of it, since he hadn't fully opened his omniscience, he didn't actually know much about the DC universe. He had only just arrived. In fact, he had skipped over the time of Annie's pregnancy entirely, manipulating time so that his entry coincided with the birth. As he drifted through the skies, pedestrians below began to notice him. A glowing child in a white robe, levitating above the city, they stared in stunned disbelief. Syd ignored the gasps, the startled cries. Glancing at the clothing styles below, he raised a brow in mild surprise. The 20th century, huh? He hadn't chosen a specific era when entering the universe, so it wasn't too surprising he'd arrived in the past. A pulse of thought, and he instantly understood the exact year. At this time, heroes like Batman hadn't even been born yet. But Wonder Woman, the daughter of Zeus, had already existed for some time. Syd thought for a moment, then decided. Let's go check out Themyscira. I'm curious to see what demigods are like. In the next second, he soared into the sky and vanished into the distance, leaving behind a city full of people in shock. Not long after, a group of clergy members from the church arrived at the hospital, urgently investigating what had happened. When they learned the full story, every single one of them was left wide-eyed. And then, overwhelmed with excitement, a bold thought began to surface in their minds. Could it be? Had the Messiah returned? They had to find him. As the church launched a fervent investigation to track the Messiah, Syd had already arrived at Themyscira, the homeland of Wonder Woman, created by Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, to house the Amazon warriors. Surrounding the island was a magical barrier, cloaking it from the outside world. To ordinary people, it didn't even exist. But Syd paid no mind to such concealments. He passed directly through the barrier and hovered above the island, calmly surveying the architecture and the women below. It didn't take long for the Amazons to spot him. Who are you? Why have you come to Themyscira? The Amazon queen, Hippolyta, arrived quickly, leading a squad of fully armed warriors. All eyes turned toward the child hovering above them. Despite his appearance, just the fact that he had found Themyscira and was flying unaided was enough to alarm them. Syd didn't answer. He simply floated down with curiosity, quietly observing these strong and well-built warrior women. As for their spears, bows, and drawn weapons, he completely ignored them. Even though he was only a projection here, not his true self, at his level, it made no difference. The power he wielded was near absolute. As he drew closer, Queen Hippolyta and the other Amazons felt their hearts tremble. This feeling. Are you a god? Queen Hippolyta muttered in disbelief. She could clearly sense how different this being was from mere mortals. Even without proof, the aura alone was enough. Hippolyta grew more alert, her voice cautious and tense. Which god are you? And why have you come to Themyscira? End of chapter. Chapter 654. 1000 PS. Syd didn't answer Queen Hippolyta's question. Instead, he glanced over the entire island of Themyscira and remarked with slight surprise. Diana has already left. Hearing her daughter's name, Hippolyta tensed, clutching her weapon more tightly. What do you want with Diana? She asked, wary and guarded. Syd replied calmly. Nothing in particular. I'm just curious about that god-slaying weapon Zeus created. God-slaying weapon. At the sound of those words, Hippolyta's expression changed dramatically. She knew exactly what that meant, and that her daughter Diana was that weapon. At the same time, another realization crept into her heart. The tone this god used when speaking of Zeus. He wasn't afraid of him in the slightest. Hippolyta shook her head. Impossible. That was Zeus, the king of the gods. Who could possibly compare to him? Unless it was a god from another pantheon. A chilling thought rose in her mind, but she quickly shook it off. Now that he knew Diana wasn't here, Syd shifted slightly and floated away from Themyscira. Hippolyta hesitated but didn't dare stop him. Only once his figure had fully vanished from view did she exhale and mutter anxiously. I hope this god doesn't bring trouble to Diana. May she be safe. Her mind kept circling back to the question, who exactly is this god? After leaving Themyscira, Syd soared through the skies at an astonishing speed, admiring the world below. Before long, he descended into a city in America, drawing the attention of countless onlookers. As he strolled through the streets, people came rushing to him, begging for help, some sick, some disabled, others with various troubles. If the request wasn't excessive, Syd would casually wave his hand and bless them, healing or restoring them instantly. He had become, to the people, a walking miracle machine. Whether or not this would cause societal chaos, that wasn't his problem. He had come to the DC universe purely for fun. He would do whatever he pleased, no matter how outrageous. As he walked through the city, a crowd began following him. Some even knelt on the ground, fervently kissing the path where his feet had floated. Seeing a swarm of excited clergy members rushing toward him, Syd merely shook his head and, amidst a chorus of gasps, ascended into the sky and flew off. He ignored the cries urging him to stay, flying across city after city. Unknowingly, he flew beyond America's borders. At some point, his eyes caught sight of a battlefield below. Explosions roared. Smoke blanketed the earth. Countless people were dying. Nature itself was being ravaged. World War I. Syd stared calmly. In the DC universe, the First World War hadn't only been caused by political strife. The Greek god of war, Ares, had manipulated much of it behind the scenes. After all, as the god of war, his strength was fueled by conflict. Syd didn't care about Ares' schemes, or the motivations of the nations involved, whether it was for resources or power. But seeing countless soldiers locked in desperate combat stirred something in his mind, a mix of amusement and malice. Since they love death so much, I'll give them death. The next moment, something miraculous occurred. Holy light poured from the skies. Wherever he flew, scorched battlefields healed instantly. Flowers bloomed in the wake of destruction, turning scenes of carnage into surreal dreamscapes. Every dead soldier, no matter how long they'd been gone, whether their bodies were intact or reduced to pulp, was restored and rose again. They stood in confusion, scanning their surroundings in disbelief. I didn't die. I'm alive again. God. Seeing their comrades fully revived, then looking up at the radiant figure floating in the heavens, they were overwhelmed with awe. Syd's glowing silhouette glided across the sky. In mere moments, millions of dead soldiers were brought back to life, completely undoing the devastation of the war thus far. The terrifying spectacle sent shockwaves through every warring nation. They had no idea how to react. Who is that? Is he a god? All those dead soldiers, brought back. This divine scene shattered their minds. Many were struck with fear. Even so, some generals and leaders still harbored resentment. They didn't want the war to end just yet. But then came an even greater shock. They couldn't kill anyone anymore. No matter what they tried, no one stayed dead. Even worse, attempts at experimentation on the resurrected were pointless. The subjects became immune to all harm, entering an invincible state. In short, they were completely powerless. Anything they tried, battles, weapons, tests, were now utterly meaningless. Nations began to unravel. There were no more casualties. The only thing being wasted now was ammunition, money, resources, and time. Even destroyed terrain and buildings would soon restore themselves. What's the point anymore? As entire governments and armies stood in stunned silence, wondering what to do next. The same astonishing miracle caught the attention of two extraordinary figures, Ares, god of war, and Diana, Wonder Woman. Who is that god? Clad in a black suit, Ares looked up at the glowing figure bathing the battlefield in holy light. He was shaken, more than the humans below. Human lives were rising like weeds under that radiant glow, each reborn again and again. Just one look, and Ares could feel how terrifying the being was. The difference between them was beyond vast. Resurrecting the dead like this, what kind of god could possibly do such a thing? He didn't dare intervene. He didn't even dare speak. All he could do was silently observe. Then he noticed something. Not far away, a young woman appeared on the battlefield. She held a shield and sword, her figure noble and resolute. She called out to the being in the sky, trying to get his attention. Diana. Ares recognized her instantly. Above. Syd glanced down, naturally spotting Wonder Woman. So, this is the first superhero I've met in the DC universe. End of chapter. Chapter 655. 1100 PS. Syd gently floated down and asked calmly. Something you need? Staring at the glowing child who appeared no older than a few years, Diana, Wonder Woman, was more shocked than ever. After a long pause, she finally spoke. You're a god, aren't you? Thank you, for reviving countless people. For stopping the war, for ending Ares' scheme. Syd didn't confirm or deny it. After offering her thanks, Diana hesitated and then said cautiously. But, why does it feel like you're playing with humanity? Despite his miraculous deeds, there was something unnerving about him, a terrifying feeling she couldn't shake. Almost like, he was toying with mankind. Syd raised a brow slightly in surprise and replied. Diana, didn't you leave Themyscira to stop Ares and create a world without war? A world without death, one where no one ever dies from war again, isn't that a good thing? Diana froze. How do you know that? She asked, dumbfounded. Syd didn't answer. Before leaving Themyscira, she had believed that if she could just stop Ares, war would vanish from the world. But after spending time in man's world, she realized, even without Ares, humans would still wage war. Then Syd spoke again, this time with intrigue. I can help you. If I wanted, this world would never see another death. In that moment, both Diana and the hidden Ares felt a chilling dread. It sounded right, but, was a world without death really a good thing? Diana increasingly felt like this being wasn't just powerful, he was playing with life itself. Syd heard her thoughts and chuckled. A world without death, isn't it beautiful? You think I'm toying with humanity? Oh. So what if I am? Smiling arrogantly, he said. If I want to do something, I can. No one can stop me. Can you stop me? As he said this, Syd looked into the future. And just as he expected, in the future, Batman, Bruce Wayne, had investigated him and developed various countermeasures. Bruce, ever the paranoid strategist, trusted no one. Not Superman, not even himself. He always kept contingency plans for everyone. Syd didn't exist in the timeline beyond the present, but the actions he took echoed into the future. The world knew about him. Some doubted it. Others believed. The church, in particular, proclaimed that the Messiah had returned. Bruce Wayne, after confirming the Messiah's existence, began crafting every possible countermeasure he could imagine, just in case Syd ever reappeared and went rogue. Syd found it amusing. He even saw Bruce discussing his plans during a Justice League meeting, trying to figure out how to respond if the Messiah returned. Is he really that dangerous? Superman asked. At this point, Syd lost interest in watching. His voice suddenly echoed in their ears, calm, cold, and omnipresent. You're preparing to deal with me. The voice, with no identifiable source, made every hero's expression shift drastically. Before they could locate the source, an image appeared before them. At the same moment, back on the battlefield, Diana and Ares were stunned to see several figures appear in the air before them. The two sides locked eyes. Diana was shocked. Among those figures, she saw herself. Past Diana and future Diana, staring at each other. Then, from the future, Bruce Wayne looked at the glowing child in the sky and said gravely, "You're the Messiah." Everyone's gaze locked onto Syd. He didn't answer, just smiled curiously. "I heard, you're preparing to deal with me." Bruce hesitated, then nodded solemnly. He didn't try to deny it. Syd stared at him, eyes glinting with interest. "To stop me? With the countermeasures you imagined?" Bruce's expression didn't change. "Everyone has a weakness. Even gods. You're no exception." As he spoke, his gaze flicked briefly towards Superman. "And what if I have none?" Syd asked, intrigued. "Impossible," Bruce replied, unwavering. "Really?" Syd's smile deepened. Then, he decided to show them what true omniscience and omnipotence meant. What to begin with? The Infinity Stone's powers would do. In the next second, Diana, Ares, Bruce, and the others widened their eyes in disbelief. Syd spoke slowly. "Time." The world shimmered. They watched time reverse, seeing the past replay before their eyes. Then, time fast-forwarded, showing glimpses of the future. Not just one future, many. Diverging timelines, alternate outcomes, all unfolded before their eyes. Then the voice continued. Space. Reality twisted. Space bent and warped. They saw the solar system, the Milky Way, the entire universe. Syd raised a hand, and the entire DC universe shrank into a radiant marble spinning in his palm. Ares and the others were stunned speechless. The voice rang out again. Mind. The scenery stabilized. Then suddenly, a flood of countless overlapping thoughts surged into their minds. The thoughts and memories of all living beings in the universe were made audible. Everyone's secrets, gods and mortals alike, were laid bare. They knew instantly what every being was thinking. Soul. They watched as Syd reached forward, and the souls of countless beings were pulled forth. Gods, mortals, it didn't matter. Their souls were grasped, altered, destroyed, then restored. And everyone felt it happen. With perfect clarity. That moment of deletion and rebirth. Power. Bruce and the others were stunned. They saw mystical forces of every kind swirling around Syd's hands. He casually lifted 2 fingers and pinched the marble-sized DC universe between them. With a faint crack, space around them began to collapse. It looked like the end of everything. Reality. The apocalyptic scene twisted and vanished, everything returned to normal. As if the destroyed reality a moment ago was fake, and this was real. Then the world transformed again. They watched as the entire universe turned into a comic book, themselves included. Ares and the rest looked down and realized they were now drawings, cartoon characters, 2D beings. Fate. Invisible threads of destiny stretched across the cosmos, linking all life. Diana and the others watched as Syd manipulated those strings, pulling, binding, controlling. All of existence became puppets on his hand. Then came the final, crushing words that would break Bruce Wayne's resolve. End of chapter. Chapter 656. Omniscience. At last, Syd allowed Batman and the others to briefly experience what true omniscience and omnipotence felt like. The sensation of knowing and being able to do absolutely anything, that crushing weight of infinite awareness and infinite power, suffocated them. Bruce Wayne. Clark Kent. Diana. Every Justice League member fell into stunned silence and mental chaos. Their minds struggled to grasp the experience. And then, as they stood in that dazed state, Syd turned his eyes toward Bruce. With curiosity in his voice, he asked, "So now, Batman, what do you think my weakness is? What method are you planning to use to stop me?" Hearing the question, Bruce's expression changed. It became extremely grim. "How do you resist this kind of power?" He felt only despair. Even Superman, a near-invincible godlike being, was still a man with weaknesses. But this was something else entirely. This was not a man. This was God. Bruce suddenly found himself believing what the church had claimed, that the being before him was truly the Messiah. Or maybe even God himself. With that realization came even deeper powerlessness. There was no plan. No countermeasure. Nothing in his arsenal that could confront such absolute dominion. Syd, seeing Bruce's defeated expression, wasn't surprised. He'd had his fun. He'd met the Justice League, tested their hearts, and demonstrated what true omnipotence looked like. And now, he was getting bored. Most importantly, his true self was on the verge of breaking through to omniscience and omnipotence level 5. With that thought, Syd looked one last time at Batman, Superman, and the others, and smiled. Farewell. In the next instant, he vanished. No energy fluctuation. No dimensional ripple. Just, gone. Leaving behind stunned figures, Batman, Ares, the gods like Zeus who had been watching, all equally baffled and apprehensive. Where had he gone? No one knew. But none of them could shake off the overwhelming dread he left behind. Meanwhile, in the Marvel Omnipotent Universe, Syd's will, which had been exploring DC, returned to his body in an instant. Eyes closed, he awaited the final surge, the final transformation into something beyond. Omniscient and Omnipotent EXP +1. Then came the final message. Ability, Omniscience and Omnipotence, max/max, level 5. In that moment, Syd changed. He transcended transcendence. Went beyond metaphysics, beyond all form. He was no longer a creation, nor a creator. He could not be defined. Could not be described. If one had to say something, it would be incomprehensible. Indivisible. Unknowable. Beyond comparison. Beyond understanding. Beyond vision. Beyond expression. He surpassed all time, all strength, all order, all value. All laws. All numbers. All cosmologies. All systems. All planes. All minds. All ranks. All religions. All language. All logic. All being and unbeing. He was beyond existence and non-existence. Beyond yes or no. Beyond form, thought, will, or soul. He was absolute. He was no longer measurable by any idea, language, or concept. No consciousness, mortal or divine, could comprehend him. No intelligence, no matter how vast, could ever conceive of his presence. He was now the one who exists beyond all. Within the Marvel Omnipotent Universe, Syd opened his eyes, manifesting a divine form comprehensible to lesser beings. At this moment, he had truly become omniscient and omnipotent. Everything, every secret, every timeline, every plane of existence, lay bare before his gaze. Marvel's universes, and the infinite beyond. All possibilities. All destinies. All truths and untruths. He now saw the source of everything. And with it, he saw the truth of his so-called system. His expression turned cold. There had never been a system. There was only the mimicry ability. Back when he first arrived in the Marvel Universe, his fear and insecurity had caused this ability to activate. In response to his need for stability, the mimicry power unconsciously constructed a familiar interface, that system. But in reality, that system was nothing but an illusion. A projection created by the mimicry ability itself. It had always been the mimicry. Now, with full omniscience, Syd also understood how this ability had formed. It was a combination of his unique soul energy, the chaotic temporal spatial energies from the dimensional transit, and his mutant X gene. These elements merged to create a power so absurd, it surpassed all known mutant abilities. And now, he also understood the other changes occurring in him. Not only because of the full attainment of the Godhead and level 5 omniscience, but because he had become the first cause, not just of Marvel, but of everything beyond. All things were born because of him. All things began because of him. Syd slowly closed his eyes. Before anything existed. In the void of darkness and chaos, a single light shimmered. A being, indescribable and unimaginable, drifted through the emptiness, glowing with primordial light. No one knew how long it had been. A second. An eternity. Even without action, the mere presence of this light birthed creation. By his influence alone, dimensions, universes, existences, began to form. Even entities like the one above all, and countless others, were born in his wake. Infinite planes. Infinite possibilities. All of it, from him. In the far, far future, a book would be written. A holy text known as the Bible would record. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. End of chapter. Chapter 657. Everything, all of it, had begun like this. A new past had overwritten the old. But this wasn't an illusion or retcon. It truly happened. And because Syd hadn't deliberately tried to conceal or erase anything, every being capable of perceiving such cosmic shifts, including the one above all, OAA, now held both versions of the past in their memory. In this moment, beings like the living tribunal, even the OAA itself, were left utterly shocked. The source of the omnipotent universe, the OAA, had changed. Who is he? Everything about us, everything we are, came from him. The living tribunal and other great cosmic entities used their powers to peer into the deepest past, and what they saw left them speechless. Vaguely, they glimpsed a being, so vast and incomprehensible that it dwarfed even the omnipotent universe. A presence cloaked in primordial, origin-born light. They realized, the OAA, the omnipotent universe, were nothing but tiny ripples birthed from this being's influence. Mere ornaments, glinting faintly along its incomprehensible expanse. On just the tip of this unfathomable iceberg, countless universes, dimensions, timelines, and realities, all comparable to entire omnipotent universes, were being born and destroyed, moment to moment. Appearing and vanishing like bubbles, like dreams, like phantoms, swirling eternally upon the surface of him. Staring at this impossible vision, the living tribunal and others were deeply shaken. They also understood something else. This being was undefinable, unknowable, unimaginable, unreachable, unknowable again, everything. What they were seeing, what they could perceive, was only what the being allowed them to see. And even then, it was but a sliver. A droplet. The faintest shimmer of an endless ocean. What is he? How could anything, surpass the OAA? And it wasn't just the cosmic beings in the omnipotent universe who were stunned. Beyond Marvel's fourth wall, in the so-called real world, reality itself, something strange was happening. Marvel's editorial team, its chief editors, and millions of comic book and film fans around the globe, were all dumbfounded. Many recent Marvel comics, animated series, and even live-action films had begun to hint, very subtly, at a strange, unknown figure. Especially in content that touched on the origin of the Marvel Universe, clues and references to this blurred entity had appeared with increasing frequency. Now, editors in Marvel's office stood slack-jawed, watching as comic panels seemingly generated themselves, depicting conversations between the OAA, the Living Tribunal, and others. From their words, they gleaned bits and pieces of information about this mysterious being. And even just those fragments were enough to shake them to their core. OAA, the omnipotent universe, were all created by this being's influence. He's the true source of all reality. The editor-in-chief gasped. The surrounding editors exchanged stunned, terrified glances. After all, the OAA was supposed to be the strongest character they had ever created. In a meta sense, the OAA was the editors. They were its real-world equivalent. The OAA had absolute editorial power, the ability to change anything, write anything, delete anything. And now? Now there was something above even the OAA. According to the dialogue they were reading, this new entity wasn't just stronger. He was beyond logic, beyond storytelling, beyond narrative. The OAA and the entire omnipotent universe were described as barely noticeable specks upon his body, nothing more than sparkling dust on the hem of his shadow. Is this for real? The editors stared at each other, utterly lost. No one dared create a character this outrageous. And then the editor-in-chief turned to the room, scowling. Which of you drew this guy? One by one, the editors shook their heads. Not me. This guy's more broken than the OAA. None of us would dare design something that overpowered. More importantly, this entity wasn't just in one book. He was now in everything. Comics, animations, movies, all had begun referencing him. It was beyond anything any of them had done, or were even capable of doing. Still, the editor-in-chief wasn't about to let this go. He frowned deeply and barked. I don't care how you do it. I want this character gone. The other editors looked like they wanted to protest, but ultimately, they said nothing. They could only swallow their doubts and follow the order. They'd done it before, erasing overpowered characters, rewriting problematic arcs. They just had to figure out a way to erase this one. Whether by creating an even more broken counter-character, or introducing some absurd cosmic weapon, or simply nerfing him into irrelevance. They began brainstorming right away. But deep down, they all had the same gnawing fear. What if this time, they couldn't? End of chapter. Chapter 658, the END. As the Marvel editors scrambled to draw impossible items and characters to reasonably eliminate the bug-level entity that had taken over their universe, countless Marvel fans remained frozen in shock. Some stared blankly at their screens, potato chips hanging from their fingertips, forgotten, utterly stunned by what they were seeing in the latest Marvel films. In both the X-Men and Avengers franchises, two entirely new characters had suddenly appeared. The Messiah, and white-clad hero. These two super Omega mutants didn't just show up, they rewrote the plots of entire films, extending runtimes, altering arcs, and completely overturning endings. Punching Omega-level Phoenix Gene. Kicking multi-dimensional demon Dormammu. Child's play. They beat up the Celestials. They smacked down the goddess of death. And in the end, even the living tribunal was defeated by these cosmic anomalies. Audiences were stunned. The once tragic ending of Avengers, Endgame, now rewritten into a happy one. Marvel fans worldwide watched the extended films, eyes wide, jaws dropped, and hearts full of excitement. Many were thrilled. Marvel movies were now endless, and they loved every second of it. So when certain platforms tried to block or delete the altered content, Marvel fans rioted. They demanded these versions be kept. This was peak Marvel, and they weren't going to let it go. Watching all this chaos, Marvel's rival company, DC, initially burst out laughing. But that laughter didn't last. Because soon, Wonder Woman, Batman, and other DC characters and films began featuring the same bug-tier character. WTF? What's going on? Why is Marvel's OP character now in our universe? DC staff panicked. This has to be sabotage. Marvel, what are you playing at? Very soon, the DC editorial team stormed Marvel's headquarters. While they'd seen weird meta-phenomena before, characters breaking the fourth wall, fictional realities influencing the real world, this was unprecedented. It wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. Their entire publication line was being hijacked. This character of yours, what the hell is it? You'd better explain, now. Marvel's editors were speechless at first, and honestly, a bit smug. They thought the DC team was overreacting. It's fine, we'll deal with it, they said, waving it off with subtle disdain. Marvel editors had long known the truth, the Marvel universe was real, on some level. Its characters, its events, they weren't entirely fictional. Some of them had even met Marvel entities. Now, with everything spiraling out of control, they had a secret plan. To transcend their mortal forms. To become gods within the Marvel Universe, transcendent deities, above all beings, or something greater. Once they achieved that, why would they care about a few DC editors? Still, for now, they had to pretend to care. They reassured the DC team and promised action. Because in truth, even they were shaken. This bug being, it was derailing their entire reality. It was ruining their ascent plan. So, they too scrambled to create countermeasures. Powerful artifacts. World-breaking characters. Ultimate nullifiers. Every trick in the book. And they failed. Completely. Every weapon. Every character. Every retcon. Gone, erased instantly by the bug being. Even attempts to nerf him fell flat. Every comic, every film scene showed the same result, absolute domination. Eventually, the DC editorial team came to a terrifying realization. This thing is another god. Damn it, Marvel, what the hell did you unleash? And we can't even do anything about it. They were on the brink of collapse. Still clinging to hope, they told themselves, maybe it's because he's a Marvel creation. Marvel must have a backdoor. They'll fix it. But that hope died too. Because Marvel's editors soon revealed, they couldn't do anything either. They hadn't even created this being. He appeared on his own. What the hell? Is there actually a god? Aya. Both DC and Marvel's editorial teams were left speechless. Back in the Marvel omnipotent universe. Syd, seated atop all reality, watched it all with amusement. He saw every timeline. Every attempt. Every tool sent against him. Nothing worked. How could it? His very being was composed of conceptual absolutes. Unknowable. Undefinable. Unimaginable. Beyond logic. Beyond story. Beyond meta. They didn't even know what he was. How could they ever defeat him? Even setting that aside, his true omniscience and omnipotence made him unbeatable. With a calm gaze, Syd turned his attention to the so-called real world, the universe of Marvel's editors. He knew it well. After all, Deadpool had often broken into it, spoken to its gods, even crossed over physically. Syd's eyes were cold. He saw every possible history. Every potential future. Every ending. He saw the Marvel editors' self-destruction, their collapse under the weight of their own ambitions. He saw everything. And he could do anything. And yet, he was bored. Truly, eternally, bored. At that moment, a familiar voice chimed in. "Oh great and noble Syd, where to next?" It was Venom, now fully transformed into Syd's loyal servant, smiling sycophantically as he awaited his master's will. Syd chuckled. Maybe. It's time to visit a universe known as the Third Dimension. He smiled. And then, he looked forward. Straight ahead. His gaze pierced through the multiverse, shattered every fourth wall, bent reality around his will. And suddenly, you felt it. Yes, you, the reader. Syd looked directly through the screen. And stared at you. End of chapter.